And Alan was very generous and brought so much to the show.
Behind the scenes of a beloved show, egos clashed, friendships frayed, and creative battles shaped its soul. In this video, we uncover 6 real feuds among the MASH cast that sparked drama, altered dynamics, and forever changed the iconic series. From subtle rivalries to bold exits, let's reveal the untold stories of the 4077th. 1. Alan Alda and Wayne Rogers. The casting of MASH in 1972 was a meticulous endeavor, a deliberate attempt to capture the irreverent spirit of Richard Hooker's novel and Robert Altman's film while crafting something new for television. Alan Alda and Wayne Rogers were the linchpins of this vision, chosen to embody the irrepressible surgeons Hawkeye Pierce and Trapper John McIntyre. The producers saw them as 2 sides of the same coin, both irreverent, both brilliant, both capable of carrying the weight of a war-torn comedy that balanced biting humor with the grim realities of the Korean War. Alda, with his quick wit and expressive eyes, was a natural fit for Hawkeye, a character whose sarcasm masked a deep well of empathy. Rogers, with his roguish charm and easy charisma, brought Trapper to life as a man who could match Hawkeye's quips while exuding a laid-back confidence that made him instantly likable. Together, they were meant to be the heartbeat of the 4077th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital, a duo that could navigate the absurdity of war with equal parts rebellion and humanity. In the early days of MASH, this vision came to fruition with remarkable clarity. Season 1 was a masterclass in chemistry. Hawkeye and Trapper were inseparable, their banter flowing like a well-rehearsed vaudeville act. They schemed against the sanctimonious Frank Burns, played by Larry Linville, and the rigid Margaret Houlihan, portrayed by Loretta Swit, with a gleeful mischief that defined the show's early tone. Whether they were rigging a raffle to torment Frank or sneaking drinks from their makeshift still in the swamp, their tented sanctuary, they moved as one. Their performances were symbiotic. Rogers' sly grin amplified Alda's rapid-fire delivery, and Alda's knack for physical comedy gave Rogers room to land deadpan one-liners. The scripts, penned by a talented team led by creator Larry Gelbart, were structured to give both men equal footing. Episodes like The Nurses or House Arrest showcased their ability to trade barbs while revealing glimpses of their shared moral outrage at the war's senselessness. Fans adored them, and critics praised the show for its bold mix of humor and heart, with Alda and Rogers as its undeniable stars. Yet, even in those early triumphs, subtle cracks began to form. The writers, under pressure to deliver weekly episodes, leaned heavily on what worked. Alda's Hawkeye had a natural magnetism that drew the audience's attention. His ability to shift from a sarcastic jab to a heartfelt monologue was uncanny, and the writers began to notice. In episodes like Yankee Doodle Doctor, Hawkeye's reflections on the war's toll, delivered through Alda's soulful performance, resonated deeply. Viewers connected with his vulnerability, his ability to articulate the pain of being a healer in a world of destruction. Trapper, by contrast, remained a more static figure. Rogers was no less talented, but his character was written as the ultimate wingman, always ready with a quip, always game for a prank, but rarely given the chance to delve into his inner world. His backstory was vague, a mention of a wife and kids back home, a nod to his surgical skill, but little else. The scripts didn't explore Trapper's fears, his dreams, or his struggles. He was the fun-loving foil, the guy who made Hawkeye's light shine brighter. By season 2, the shift was unmistakable. Hawkeye's role expanded, not just in screen time, but in emotional depth. Episodes began to center on his moral dilemmas, his guilt over losing a patient, his anger at the war's futility, his struggle to maintain his humanity. In The Nurses, Hawkeye's heartfelt speech about the nurse's unsung heroism stole the episode, while Trapper's contributions were limited to a few sly remarks. In Carry On Hawkeye, Alda carried an entire episode as the sole surgeon during a flu outbreak, showcasing his character's resilience and vulnerability. Rogers, meanwhile, was often relegated to the background, reacting to Hawkeye's intensity rather than driving the narrative himself. The writers, perhaps unconsciously, began to see Hawkeye as the show's emotional anchor, and Alda's growing influence behind the scenes only amplified this trend. Alda was not content to simply act. He was a creative force, deeply invested in the show's potential to say something meaningful about war, morality, and the human condition. He began writing episodes starting with The Nurses in season 2, and his scripts were infused with a desire to push MASH beyond its comedic roots. He advocated for stories that explored the psychological toll of war, the absurdity of bureaucracy, and the fleeting moments of connection that kept the characters sane. His passion was infectious, and the writer's room responded. Hawkeye became the vehicle for these themes, his monologues and introspective moments giving the show a gravitas that set it apart from other sitcoms. Alda's ability to deliver these moments, his voice cracking with emotion, his eyes conveying a mix of exhaustion and defiance, made him indispensable. The network noticed. Ratings for Hawkeye-centric episodes were strong, and fan mail poured in, praising Alda's ability to make them laugh and cry in the same breath. For Wayne Rogers, the changes were impossible to ignore. He had signed on for MASH expecting a true partnership, a show where Trapper and Hawkeye would share the spotlight as equals. The producers had promised as much, assuring him that the show would revolve around their dynamic. In season 1, that promise held true, but as Hawkeye's role grew, Trapper's shrank. Rogers received scripts with fewer lines, fewer scenes, and no opportunities to explore his character's depth. Trapper had no equivalent to Hawkeye's letters home, no moments of quiet reflection, no storylines that revealed his past or his pain. Rogers, a skilled actor with a sharp comedic sensibility, felt underutilized. He began to question his place in the show, wondering why Trapper was being sidelined. In private conversations with producers, he voiced his frustration, asking for more substantial material. He didn't want to overshadow Alda. He simply wanted the parody he'd been promised. The producers listened, but offered little. They explained that the show's evolving tone demanded a central figure, and Alda's Hawkeye had become that figure. The writers were under pressure to meet deadlines, and they gravitated toward what was working: Hawkeye's emotional complexity. Network executives reinforced this direction, sending memos that praised episodes with Hawkeye at their core. Trapper's moments, while entertaining, were seen as secondary. Rogers pushed harder, requesting a chance to write or contribute ideas, but the writer's room was Alda's domain. Rogers was an actor, not a writer, and the producers were reluctant to disrupt a formula that was proving successful. By the end of season 2, Rogers felt like an afterthought, a supporting player in a show that was supposed to be his as much as Alda's.
The tension came to a head in season 3. Rogers, now openly dissatisfied, began to weigh his options. He was a talented actor with a promising career ahead of him, and he refused to be reduced to a glorified sidekick. The producers, aware of his discontent, tried to placate him with assurances of future development, but the scripts told a different story. Trapper remained a static character, his role limited to wisecracks and camaraderie. Rogers saw the writing on the wall. MASH was becoming Hawkeye's show, and there was little room for Trapper to grow. In a bold move, he decided to leave. A contractual loophole allowed him to exit before signing on for season 4, and he took it. He informed the producers mid-season, filming his final scenes without ceremony. There was no grand farewell, no emotional goodbye for Trapper. Rogers simply walked away, leaving behind a show that was on the cusp of becoming a cultural phenomenon. The impact of Rogers' departure was immediate and profound. When season 4 premiered in September 1975, fans were shocked to find Trapper gone. The show addressed his absence with brutal brevity. A single line of dialogue explained that Trapper had been discharged and sent home. Hawkeye, standing in the swamp, stared at Trapper's empty cot, his expression a mix of loss and resignation. The moment was fleeting, and the show moved on, with the operating room demanding Hawkeye's attention. For viewers, the abruptness was jarring. Trapper had been a beloved character, a vital part of the 4077's soul, and his exit felt like a betrayal. Fan letters flooded the network, demanding explanations. Why hadn't Trapper gotten a proper send-off? Why hadn't he and Hawkeye shared a final moment? The producers, caught off guard by the backlash, defended their choice, citing Rogers' decision to leave and the need to keep the show moving forward. To fill the void, the producers introduced Mike Farrell as BJ Honeycutt, a new surgeon who arrived in the season 4 premiere. BJ was not a replacement for Trapper, but a reinvention of the second lead role. Where Trapper was brash and rebellious, BJ was quieter, more introspective, a family man whose longing for his wife and daughter added a new layer of emotional depth to the show. His humor was understated, his demeanor steady, and his friendship with Hawkeye evolved into something different from the chaotic camaraderie of the early seasons. BJ and Hawkeye didn't just trade jokes, they shared vulnerabilities, confided in each other, and navigated the war's horrors with a mutual sense of endurance. Episodes like Welcome to Korea and The Nurses highlighted their growing bond, showing a partnership that was less about pranks and more about survival. The introduction of BJ marked a turning point for MASH. The show's tone shifted, becoming less anarchic and more reflective. The writers, emboldened by Alda's creative influence, leaned into stories that explored the psychological and emotional toll of war. Hawkeye remained the emotional core, but BJ's presence added a new dynamic, allowing the show to delve into themes of loyalty, sacrifice, and the longing for home. Farrell's performance was a perfect complement to Alda's, his quiet strength balancing Hawkeye's intensity. The audience responded, and the show's ratings remained strong, proving that MASH could survive the loss of a major character. For Wayne Rogers, life after MASH was a mix of reinvention and reflection. He didn't fade into obscurity. Instead, he carved out a diverse career that showcased his versatility. He starred in TV shows like House Calls, where he played a charming doctor, and took on roles in films and guest spots on various series. Beyond acting, Rogers found success as a businessman and investor, eventually becoming a regular commentator on financial news programs. His sharp mind and quick wit, so evident in his portrayal of Trapper, served him well in these new ventures. When asked about MASH in later years, Rogers was candid but not bitter. He acknowledged the camaraderie he'd shared with Alda and the cast, but he stood by his decision to leave. Staying, he believed, would have meant accepting a diminished role, and he valued his creative autonomy too much for that. Rogers' departure was a pivotal moment in MASH's history, a reminder that even the most successful shows are shaped by human choices and conflicts. The show went on to run for 11 seasons, evolving with each cast change and creative shift. New characters like BJ Honeycutt, Charles Emerson Winchester III, played by David Ogden Stiers, and others brought fresh perspectives, but the loss of Trapper lingered in the show's DNA. His absence underscored the impermanence of life in a war zone, where friendships could be cut short without warning. It also highlighted the show's ability to adapt, to find new stories in the face of change.
In the years that followed, MASH became more than a sitcom. It became a cultural touchstone. Its blend of humor and humanity, forged in those early seasons by Alda and Rogers, set a standard that few shows have matched. The dynamic between Hawkeye and Trapper, though brief, laid the foundation for the show's emotional resonance. Their chemistry, two surgeons laughing in the face of death, scheming to preserve their sanity, captured the absurdity and tragedy of war in a way that felt universal. Rogers' decision to leave was a gamble, but it was also an act of self-respect, a refusal to be overshadowed. And while Hawkeye became the face of MASH, Trapper's legacy endured in the show's early spirit, a reminder of a time when two men shared the stage, equals in a world that refused to make sense. 2. McLean Stevenson and Gary Burghoff. Gary Burghoff's Radar O'Reilly was the soul of the 4077. Small in stature, large in heart, Radar knew what people needed before they asked. He heard helicopters before anyone else. He fed the animals. He delivered orders. He kept the camp running like a ghost in the machine. Off camera, Burghoff worked hard. He didn't want to be comic relief. He asked for growth, for depth. He got some. Scenes where Radar panicked, loved, grieved. He had a soft singing voice and played drums in the officers' club. Viewers adored him. Letters poured in, toys were sent. Radar was beloved. Stevenson noticed. Jokingly, he called Radar the real camp commander. On set, he teased Burghoff for stealing scenes, for getting all the pathos, all the fan mail. It was mostly in good humor, but there was tension. Occasionally, Burghoff pushed back. He wanted respect, not ribbing. He didn't like being the butt of every backstage joke. Writers caught wind of it. They saw sparks fly in script meetings. One incident involved an argument over who deserved a solo episode. Stevenson and Burghoff both lobbied for it. The writers moved on. Another time, Wayne Rogers threw a chair, not in anger, but to break the tension. It worked. People laughed. But the moment left a mark. Tensions were simmering. And by season 5, Burghoff felt done. Radar had hit every note, played every beat. Now he was stuck behind a desk. His scenes involved paperwork and exposition. He wanted out. The producers let him go, graciously. Radar's farewell came in a 2-part episode. He got a promotion. He said goodbye. He drove away. The camera lingered on empty chairs. Fans wept. Some said Radar was the real heart of MASH. His exit hurt more than any other. He wasn't replaced. His duties were split among others. But his absence echoed. His spirit haunted the mess tent, the Jeep, the office. Burghoff moved on to music, painting, invention. Stevenson stayed another season, then left. Their feud faded. What remained was legacy.
The lesson? Even small characters can shape a show. Even backstage tension can ripple into scripts.
And even the heart of a series can drive away, quietly, leaving only silence behind. In the end, MASH thrived because it accepted change. It let its cast evolve. It let its stories deepen. It turned loss into character, pain into comedy, absence into presence. That's why MASH wasn't just a show. It was life, stretched thin, lit by laughter, and always adapting. 3. Alan Alda and Mike Farrell. Mike Farrell joined MASH in 1975, stepping into the role of Captain BJ Honeycutt during the show's 4th season. His arrival marked a significant shift for the series, as he replaced Wayne Rogers' beloved character, Trapper John McIntyre. Farrell brought a distinct energy to the 4077th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital, embodying a character who was both a skilled surgeon and a devoted family man. BJ's warmth and grounded nature contrasted with Trapper's roguish charm, offering a fresh dynamic to the show's ensemble. BJ frequently spoke of his wife,
Peg, and their daughter, Erin, with a tenderness that grounded his character in a way that resonated with audiences. His personal touches, keeping a bundle of Peg's letters tied with a ribbon, cooking bacon and eggs in the mess tent, or sharing quiet moments with Hawkeye Pierce over a chessboard or a flask of whiskey on cold Korean nights, gave BJ a relatable humanity. Off-camera, Farrell found himself in awe of Alan Alda, who played Hawkeye Pierce and was already a cornerstone of the show. Alda's range as an actor was undeniable. He could pivot effortlessly from biting sarcasm to raw vulnerability, delivering lines that cut through the chaos of war with surgical precision. Farrell observed Alda's ability to navigate complex emotional scenes, whether it was a moment of quiet grief over a lost patient or a fiery outburst against the absurdity of war. Alda's wit was sharp, but his commitment to the craft was even sharper. He had a knack for calming tensions on set, whether it was soothing a frustrated actor or mediating a disagreement with the crew. Farrell saw how Alda shaped MASH's moral core, pushing for stories that didn't just entertain, but challenged viewers to confront the human cost of conflict. For Farrell, Alda was not just a co-star, but a mentor, someone whose professionalism and artistry he aspired to emulate.
Their friendship blossomed quickly. The two men began carpooling to the set, their conversations ranging from the mundane to the profound. During breaks, they'd sit outside, smoking rolled cigarettes and swapping stories about their early days in the industry. Farrell's struggles in small theater productions, Alda's time honing his craft in improvisational comedy. They laughed over the absurdity of network notes, like demands for more punchy dialogue or complaints about scripts with too many preachy speeches. These moments of camaraderie built a bond that became a cornerstone of their on-screen chemistry. Yet, as often happens in creative partnerships, their friendship was tinged with a subtle rivalry. Farrell, eager to prove himself as more than a replacement for Trapper, threw himself into the role of BJ with relentless dedication. He pored over scripts, analyzing every line for opportunities to deepen his character. He sought Alda's feedback, often asking him to run lines after hours or to critique his delivery. Alda, ever the professional, was generous with his time, but his notes were precise, sometimes cutting, always pushing Farrell to refine his performance. Farrell took it in stride, seeing it as a chance to grow, but the dynamic wasn't without its challenges. As Farrell's confidence grew, he began advocating for more substantial storylines for BJ. He wanted episodes that showcased his character's leadership and moral complexity. The writers, recognizing his potential, began to oblige. In one memorable episode, BJ took command during a typhus outbreak, making life or death decisions under pressure while grappling with the weight of responsibility. Another storyline saw him writing a heartfelt letter home to Peg, lamenting missing Erin's birthday, a moment that revealed his quiet vulnerability. These scenes allowed Farrell to stretch as an actor, proving he could carry the emotional weight of a leading role.
4. Larry Linville and the writers. Larry Linville joined MASH in 1972 as Major Frank Burns, a character whose stiff posture, tightly pressed uniform, and sanctimonious attitude made him the perfect foil for the show's irreverent heroes. Frank was a man of contradictions, a stickler for military protocol who secretly pilfered liquor from supply crates, a married man nursing an awkward crush on head nurse Margaret Houlihan, and a self-proclaimed patriot who tattled on his colleagues to Colonel Blake. His role was designed for laughs, and Linville played it with relish, leaning into Frank's pompous incompetence with a gleeful sneer. In the early seasons, Frank Burns was pure comic relief. He fumbled through Radar's labyrinthine paperwork, wilted under Hawkeye's razor-sharp wit, and faced constant rejection from Margaret. His punishments, kitchen duty, extra shifts, or public humiliation kept him as the camp's punching bag. Audiences loved to hate him, and Linville's exaggerated performance made Frank a memorable antagonist. But by season 5, Linville began to feel trapped. He believed Frank had become a one-dimensional caricature, existing solely to be mocked. He longed for a chance to explore Frank's inner life, to show moments of doubt, vulnerability, or even a flicker of redemption. Linville approached the producers with his concerns, requesting storylines that gave Frank more depth. He suggested scenes where Frank might question his blind adherence to orders or show a glimmer of compassion for a patient. He wanted Frank to have a journey, not just a punchline. But the writers, under relentless pressure to produce episodes on a weekly schedule, were stretched thin. Balancing humor, drama, and the show's growing ensemble was no small feat, and they leaned heavily on Frank's established role as the camp's buffoon. They doubled down on his comedic missteps, writing scenes where he convened absurd mock courts or snitched on his tent mates for minor infractions. The
The tone remained light, and Frank's character stayed stagnant. Frustrated, Linville grew increasingly vocal. He skipped a story meeting in protest, a bold move that sent ripples through the production. He told the writers he was considering leaving, feeling that Frank's lack of growth was a disservice to both the character and his own talents as an actor. The writers, caught off guard, tried to placate him with small concessions. A line here, a moment of vulnerability there, but it wasn't enough. In 1977, Linville made good on his threat, submitting his resignation and filming his final scenes. In his last episode, Frank was deemed incompetent by a visiting general and reassigned to a desk job in Tokyo. His final salute to the camp, delivered with a mix of defiance and quiet defeat, was a rare glimpse into the complexity Linville had craved for the character.
Frank's exit paved the way for a new antagonist, Colonel Charles Emerson Winchester III, played by David Ogden Stiers. Winchester was a stark contrast to Frank, a Harvard-educated surgeon with a refined demeanor, a silver-handled cane, and a penchant for classical music. His arrogance was intellectual rather than petty, and his clashes with the 407 7th were rooted in ideological differences rather than cartoonish incompetence. Winchester's arrival shifted the show's tone, moving away from slapstick toward more nuanced, character-driven conflicts. The humor matured, and the stakes felt higher, as Winchester's sharp wit and moral ambiguity challenged Hawkeye and BJ in ways Frank never could. Linville's departure, though contentious, had a lasting impact. His clash with the writers underscored a critical truth. Even comedic villains need room to evolve. His push for a more layered Frank forced the writers to rethink their approach to antagonists, leading to the creation of a character like Winchester, who became one of MASH's most compelling figures. Linville's exit, while abrupt, sparked a creative evolution that carried the show through its later seasons, proving that an actor's advocacy can reshape a series for the better.
5. Loretta Swit and the writers. Loretta Swit joined MASH in 1972 as Lieutenant Margaret Houlihan, the head nurse of the 4077th. With her crisp uniform, tightly wound bun, and ever-present clipboard, Margaret was the epitome of military discipline. She enforced regulations with an iron will, kept the nursing staff on a tight schedule, and bristled at Hawkeye's relentless pranks. In the show's early seasons, Margaret was often defined by her nickname, Hot Lips, a carryover from the 1970 MASH film that reduced her to a sexualized stereotype. Swit, a classically trained actress with a fierce commitment to her craft, found the moniker demeaning. She saw Margaret as a skilled professional, not a punchline, and she made it her mission to elevate the character beyond the writer's initial vision. Swit's advocacy began early. She confronted the writers about the Hot Lips nickname, arguing that it undermined Margaret's authority and sent the wrong message to viewers. The writers, citing the nickname's popularity with fans, were initially resistant, but Swit was relentless. She emphasized Margaret's role as a leader in the surgical unit, a woman who thrived under pressure and saved lives daily. By season 5, her persistence paid off. The nickname was phased out, and Margaret began to be addressed by her rank or name, a small but significant victory that restored her dignity.
Swit didn't stop there. She pushed for storylines that showcased Margaret's strength and complexity. She requested episodes that highlighted her courage, like one where Margaret held the camp together during a chaotic evacuation, barking orders with unshakable resolve. She suggested a storyline where Margaret cared for a wounded friend against direct orders, revealing her compassion and defiance. Another idea saw Margaret comforting a child in a field hospital, a quiet moment that humanized her in a way the early scripts rarely did. The writers, initially stretched by the demands of a weekly series, began to incorporate these ideas, recognizing the potential to deepen Margaret's character. The romantic subplot between Margaret and Frank Burns was another point of contention. Swit felt the pairing was implausible, arguing that Margaret's intelligence and ambition made her an unlikely match for Frank's bumbling cowardice. She proposed alternative arcs that focused on Margaret's personal growth, such as a story exploring her post-war aspirations or her struggle to balance duty with personal desires. The writers, valuing the tension the affair added to the show, kept some elements, but gradually scaled back the romance,
giving Margaret more independent storylines. By the later seasons, Margaret had evolved into a fully realized officer, leading supply convoys, managing scarce resources, and standing firm during air raids to protect her patients. She even joined Hawkeye in a protest march against the war, a bold move that cemented her as a character of conviction. Swit's advocacy transformed Margaret into one of television's first strong female leads in a male-dominated setting. Her efforts anticipated the rise of complex female characters in later dramas, proving that a woman could be both a leader and a human being, with flaws and aspirations. When Swit left MASH after its 11th season, she expressed gratitude to the writers for listening and adapting. She praised the show for evolving with the times and for allowing Margaret to end her arc as a respected veteran officer. Swit's legacy on MASH was not just in her performance, but in her determination to give Margaret a voice, reshaping the show and inspiring future generations of storytellers.
6. Harry Morgan and the Writers. Harry Morgan joined MASH in 1974 as Colonel Sherman T. Potter, stepping into the role of the 4077th's commanding officer after McLean Stevenson's departure as Colonel Reese. Morgan, a seasoned actor with a gravelly voice and a warm, authoritative presence, brought a new dynamic to the show. Potter was a stark contrast to his predecessor, less bumbling, more seasoned, a career army man who balanced discipline with a fatherly compassion that endeared him to the camp. His folksy wisdom, often delivered with a twinkle in his eye, grounded the 477th amidst the chaos of the Korean War. Whether he was calming a panicked radar with a quiet word or reining in Hawkeye's rebellious streak with a stern but fair order, Potter became the steady hand the show needed as it transitioned into its more introspective later seasons. Behind the scenes, however, Morgan's integration into the MASH ensemble was not without friction. As the show evolved under Alan Alda's creative influence, the writers leaned heavily into stories that explored the psychological toll of war, often centering on Hawkeye's emotional arc. Morgan, while appreciative of the show's depth, felt that Potter's role was being underutilized. He saw the Colonel as more than a figurehead or a dispenser of homespun advice. Potter, in Morgan's view, was a complex character, a man who had seen 2 wars, lost friends, and carried the weight of leadership in a place where death was a daily reality. Morgan wanted episodes that delved into Potter's past, his struggles with command, or his private moments of doubt, giving audiences a glimpse into the man beneath the uniform. Morgan approached the writers with specific ideas. He suggested a storyline where Potter grappled with a decision to send a young soldier back into combat, knowing the risks, revealing his internal conflict between duty and morality. Another idea involved Potter writing a letter to his wife, Mildred, reflecting on his fear of returning home a changed man. These pitches were rooted in Morgan's desire to showcase Potter's humanity, to move beyond the avuncular stereotype, and explore the toll of leadership. However, the writers, juggling the demands of a large ensemble and tight production schedules, were hesitant. They valued Potter's role as a stabilizing force, a counterpoint to the chaos of Hawkeye and BJ's antics, and were reluctant to shift focus from the show's established stars. This disconnect led to tension. Morgan, known for his professionalism, was not one to raise his voice, but his frustration was evident in script meetings. He questioned why Potter's scenes were often limited to brief moments of command or lighthearted exchanges, like trading horse riding stories with Radar. In one heated discussion, he pointed out that Potter's military experience, decades in the saddle, as he often quipped, could anchor a story about the generational divide between young draftees and career soldiers. The writers listened, but argued that Hawkeye's emotional monologues and BJ's family-driven storylines were driving ratings. Potter's role, they insisted, was to hold the camp together, not to steal the spotlight. Morgan, feeling his character was being sidelined, pushed back, emphasizing that even a supporting character deserved moments of depth. The tension peaked during season 6, when Morgan hinted to producers that he might reconsider his commitment if Potter remained a one-note figure. The writers, wary of losing another key cast member after Rogers and Stevenson's exits, made concessions. They crafted an episode, The Nurse's Crisis, where Potter took charge during a shortage of medical supplies, revealing his resourcefulness and quiet grief over a lost patient from his World War I days. Another episode explored Potter's struggle with insomnia, showing him pacing the camp at night, haunted by memories of fallen comrades. These moments, though rare, allowed Morgan to flex his dramatic range, delivering performances that were understated yet powerful. Morgan's advocacy didn't just benefit his character. It pushed the writers to rethink how they handled supporting roles. Potter's expanded presence added a layer of gravitas to the show, reinforcing its themes of resilience and sacrifice. By the time MASH ended in 1983, Potter had become a beloved figure, his quiet strength a testament to Morgan's persistence. The feud, though less explosive than others, underscored a truth. Even the steadiest characters need room to grow, and an actor's quiet determination can shape a show's legacy.
legacy. These 6 stories show how MASH evolved through conflict. Each clash forced change. Each clash pushed the characters to new depths. Each clash reminded everyone that no show, no matter how well planned, stays the same. MASH survived and thrived because it remained willing to shift, to grow, and to let its people spar when needed.